itself from the Kanakahake word tukaranto, which translates to the place in the water where the trees are standing. The reference is said to come from Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat fishers hosting stakes for fishing weirs in the narrows of the river systems, many of which are now paved over with concrete. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. And as settlers on this land, we seek to build awareness and active solidarity with Indigenous peoples. I'll also maybe take care of just a couple of housekeeping items, which is, we hope you have lots of questions to ask tonight of the panel and panelists. So if you're online, please type your questions into the Q&A portion. And if you're here in person, we'll make sure to give a little bit of time after the panelists have finished for you to be able to ask questions as well. So just write them down. We'll wait for the panelists to finish their remarks before we call on the Q&A. So maybe I'll just start off by introducing the panel tonight. I'm sure everybody is feeling the impacts of climate change in every way imaginable. It feels to me like every year we're setting records around the record heat, record storms, record floods, record droughts, record fires, and so forth. And even though the federal government would like us to believe that workers' wages cause inflation, we also know that climate change is a really big driver of the rising costs of food, in addition to, of course, the greedflation with our corporate CEOs in the grocery stores and so forth. But these are one of the many ways that climate change affects us every day in every way. What is good news is that the federal government has finally tabled the Sustainable Jobs Legislation framework. And I think what's important about a framework is that it gives us a chance to shape it and to put, flesh on the bones, if you will. Of course, one of the things that they promised is to have regional consultations, regional tables, where they're going to be liaising and hearing feedback from different levels of government. So Indigenous governments, local governments, provincial governments, territorial governments. And again, that's a very important dialogue to be had. But what does seem to be a little bit weak, shall we say, is the role of workers and the role of labor unions in this process. And as we know, having union representation is very important because workers need to have protections on the jobs if they're going to be able to speak out in ways that may differ from what their employers have to say. So we need to make sure that the workers who are involved are also accountable and supported against reprisals in the workplace. So these are the things that we can bring to the framework to make it inclusive and to make sure that the bulk of us, the bulk of our communities have ownership. We also want to make sure that we have buy-in because we know it's going to take a monumental effort for us to make the kind of transition that we need. And we know that there's going to be good jobs in the future. But we also want to make sure that it's not just, the new jobs of the future. We also want to make sure that existing low carbon jobs are also good jobs. And as Naomi Klein has observed, very often the already existing low carbon jobs like childcare and long-term care workers or garbage workers or recycling plant workers are people who are not always been included in the climate change conversations. And so we want to make sure that everybody is brought into the picture. And we also want to make sure that the policies that are developed are not harmful to working class and poor communities. So many of us reject the notion that workers should have to pay additional for a fair and decent climate when we know that so many of the big polluters are corporations and we need governments that are prepared to stand up to those. We don't think we should pay for the climate crisis. We think the big corporations that are profiting so much should be the ones to pay. And that's why we're all here tonight. We want to actually hear from workers about how climate is affecting people's jobs. We want to hear about their sector of work, what changes have already occurred, what changes they are expecting as we transition to a low carbon and zero carbon economy. And again, this panel is just the beginning of a conversation. It doesn't represent all the different sectors, but I think it's a really important first step in creating the kind of dialogue and building those links of solidarity that are going to help us arrive together at a vision where everybody sees themselves included in a future sustainable, low carbon, zero carbon economy. So with no further ado, I'd like to begin to introduce our panelists. And I also do want to remind everybody, we will have some times for question and answers afterward. So it is my great honor to introduce 4 workers. Jess, who is a former farm worker and member of the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change. We'll be hearing from Trevor Hache, a 4th-year apprentice plumber with UA Local 71, and Rebecca Keach, a rank and file auto worker, who will all be who will each have 10 minutes to answer 4 broad categories of folks. We want to hear about your sector and about what your work currently looks like. We want to hear about what changes you anticipate or are already experiencing because of the energy transition or climate change. We want to hear your hopes for yourself, your colleagues, and your community in the future as we transition away from fossil fuels. And what we want to hear from you, what do you want your elected representatives to know as they build for this important and crucial transition? So now I'm going to open up to Trevor, who's actually joining us online, and probably all of you on Zoom right now can see Trevor. Let me just make a brief introduction here as well. Trevor is a father of 2 great kids. He is a 4th-year apprentice plumber in Ottawa. He previously worked as a newspaper reporter and photographer and for various nonprofit and charitable organizations concerned about public health and climate change, including Ecology Ottawa, Just Food, and the Healthy Transportation Coalition. In 2019, he was named the Ottawa and District Labor Council's Community Activist Award winner. The recognition is given annually to individuals or organizations who, quote, repeatedly demonstrate a commitment to those in our community in need and whose work ensures those in need are provided opportunities or resources to help that need. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to pass it over to Trevor. Thanks again so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Pam. And good evening, everybody. I'm coming to you from Ottawa, which is, of course, unceded Algonquin territory. And I live in Canada, which is a suburb in the west end of Ottawa. And I'll just start by trying to answer, I guess, the first question, which is, what does your sector and your work currently look like? So thanks, Pam, for that great introduction. And it's really a pleasure to be with you all this evening. So as was mentioned, I am an apprentice plumber, and I was very green, inexperienced when I became a member of UA Local 71. I had not seen in my life previously much use in picking up the tools and getting things done. I've been learning a lot, and it's been a very, very humbling experience, I can tell you that. But just generally about our sector, those people across the country, and there are about 60,000 members that the United Association has across Canada. They work in every region of Canada in plumbing, pipe fitting, welding, steam fitting, sprinkler fitting, and refrigeration. We have gas and oil technicians, instrumentation mechanics, and we really do work all across Canada in the far north and on all the coasts and everywhere in between. Personally, I've worked in Ottawa in commercial buildings, in private homes, and in recent years in the new construction of high-rise residential buildings. There are a lot of cranes that you can see across Ottawa every day. There's a lot of work right now, which is really good for us. Back when I was working in the nonprofit sector, I worked with many others across the city to advocate for the city of Ottawa to put more money into building affordable housing located near rapid transit stations here. In recent years, I've been involved in construction projects to build some affordable housing. And our city, as has many across the country, has declared a housing emergency or an affordable housing emergency. There's a tremendous lack of that, we all know. So it feels good to be part of the construction team putting shovels in the ground to help try to address that in a small way. But mostly in Ottawa, it seems we're building, at least most of the projects that I've been involved with, high-end rental units that few people I know could afford. Still, I am grateful to be working and extremely glad to be a member of UA Local 71. The brothers and sisters I've worked with are some of the finest people I know. They're very hardworking, honest, intelligent, creative, and thoughtful people. And I worry about them, frankly, because there is a lot of economic uncertainty, there's a lot of political uncertainty, and there is a tremendous amount of disinformation that sadly many people are consuming, including many people in the construction industry. And so those people concerned about social justice, environmental justice, and good paying unionized jobs, we really need to work together to ensure that the true information is going out and that we're building solidarity as much as possible to ensure that people are getting good information and that we're standing shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters to make a brighter future for all of us. In terms of what changes I anticipate or are already experiencing because of the energy transition or climate change, I find myself often extremely anxious about the climate crisis that we're living in and the planet that we are leaving for young people, including my two kids who are aged 11 and 8. Personally, we really try to do our part. When we bought our house in 2012, we put solar panels on it. On Wednesday night, we are test driving an electric vehicle, but it's so expensive. I don't know if we're going to actually be able to afford it. So I don't know if we're going to be able to, take part in getting rid of fossil fuels in the transportation sector personally at the moment, based on our income. Government, I think, should really do more to make those vehicles even more affordable. I know some provinces are doing more than Ontario is, which is Ontario, unfortunately, the current government is doing very, very little, next to nothing really, to make electric vehicles more affordable. We're also soon hoping to take part in the Government of Canada's Greener Homes Grant, where we hope to retrofit our house and make it more energy efficient. My kids and I have witnessed intense thunderstorms and crazy windstorms in recent years. My daughter still, when there are thunderstorms rolling in, is very anxious about the weather because of some pretty intense storms that we've seen on our doorsteps. This summer, I've had to work outside while Ottawa's air was thick, dark, and dangerous with wildfire smoke. I worked inside high-rise new construction buildings during intense heat waves with all the windows closed. A lot of the general contractors provide heat in the buildings that you're working in, but as of yet, we haven't seen the widespread use of air conditioning in new construction buildings for the workers that are working in those buildings. So I think increasingly that's something we're going to have to start fighting for and start ensuring that type of thing is being provided, because sadly, I don't think governments are doing enough to stop climate change in the ways we need them to. So I think we're going to be working in hot buildings for many decades to come that are just going to be getting hotter and hotter. This summer, during one of the most serious heat waves that we experienced in Ottawa, I was working outside on a radiant floor heating system with a colleague, a journeyman, and we were in the direct sun. We were sweating intensely. The second day that we were assigned that task, we started our workday at 5 a.m. to try to get our work done prior to the sun making its way to the west side of the building around 11:30 a.m. So those are also things that workers are having to do, is to really shift their workday to really early hours. And unfortunately, that means that when it comes time to be home and present with my family, I'm going to be that much more tired in the evenings when my kids get home from school if I'm waking up and having to be ready to work on the job site at 5 a.m. In terms of what my hopes are for myself, my colleagues, and the community in the future as the world transitions away from fossil fuels, I would just hope that all my brothers and sisters in the United Association continue to have very good paying jobs, benefits, and very adequate pensions. We need to learn from other jurisdictions that are transitioning toward a more sustainable and restorative future. Denmark, for example, is one country that we could be learning from. It's the world's largest oil and gas producer, and which has committed to ending oil and gas extraction. So it's the world's largest oil and gas producer, which is committed to ending oil and gas extraction. Denmark is the only country with a large oil and gas sector to make such a clear phase out commitment across its entire economy. And I think that we really need to ensure that we're building momentum and social solidarity around these ideas. Um, I think just to try to sum up, because I don't want to go over my time here, in terms of what do I want elected representatives to know as they build plans for a transition, really no worker and no one can be left behind. We really need to ensure that this transition is as easy as possible for low and middle income people and their families. Many of the upfront costs associated with the Greener Homes Grant, for example, is something that people will find to be a massive barrier. We're living in an affordability crisis, one in which good paying unionized jobs are hard to make ends meet with, and that's a unionized job. It's hard to make ends meet with a unionized job. So more needs to be done to address the affordability crisis, and as much as possible, affordability improvements should be coupled with energy efficiency improvements. I'll just say that the governments could also make it easier for workers to become unionized. There are things the federal and provincial governments could be doing to make it easier for workers to unionize their workplaces. We need strong representation in our workplaces. And just finally, I'll mention that the Canada's Building Trades Unions, also known as the CBTU, continues to advocate for legislation linking the proposed federal investment tax credits in green technologies to good labor conditions, including prevailing wage for all workers on eligible projects and apprentices performing at least 10% of the work hours on these projects. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that, Trevor. I really appreciated the points you finished up on about measures to make it easier for workers to join unions, but also to really think through the kind of policy decisions that are being made. Is it just supply of housing, or can we start imagining non-market housing so that it's not just new condo developments that only high-income people can afford? So I really appreciate all the contributions you just made. Now I'm going to pass it over to Jess. I'll just do a brief introduction. Jess is a member of Migrant Workers Alliance for Change and a farm worker living in Toronto. She escaped from an abusive strawberry farm in Nova Scotia in 2021 and was forced to become undocumented when the Canadian government denied her open work permit application. Since then, she's been uniting with other migrant workers to fight for equal rights to healthcare, to housing, and family unity under the Status for All campaign. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Jess.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. So great to be here. I like talk. So my name is Jess. I'm from Jamaica as farm worker. You know, we're from the Caribbean, which to be there is many farm workers all over the world. So my take on this problem, I will only share my story because what I live. I came here 2021 to work as a migrant farm worker, but the abuse on the farm was very, very bad. So when I say bad, I remember I went out to pick strawberries, and that's a hard thing to do. I'm telling you, it's really hard. You have to be on your knees. So that's not safe for workers, you know, to be down there or bending your neck for the whole entire pickings that you're doing. It is not good for your health because you can't drink water while you're doing that. The circulation will go down your head. So that is not safe for workers. They have to put more infrastructure in place how to get those strawberry there because we're willing to work, but it doesn't strain the workers doing that, you know, because I said when it strain the workers, we came here to work and helping the economy, but at the end of the day, it's not really helping us as the worker. So it's unfair treatment because we're not getting no benefits. Because when you work here for 10, 15, 20, or 30 years, if you choose to, when you go back to you're not getting no benefit, no pension. There's nothing put in place for where you're working for you to get something back. There's nothing because they're paying us cheap laborers. So in order for us to be treated fairly, we are asking the government to step in and give us permanent residency so we can at least we can speak about the situation that we are in, you know, what's need to be fixed. I remember there are days I went to wash my clothes because you need your clothes to prepare yourself for the weather. And there's no dryer. So where are we going to dry our clothes? It's cold. In Nova Scotia, it's really cold. If it is in summer, it is cold. So we need dryers. We can't speak up about that. If we do speak up about that, they threaten us by saying, oh, they're gonna deport us, send us back home. So you're working in fear and the condition is not right for us. I remember working here in Ontario too, while I was doing apples. I went out there one morning and I'm telling you, the first time I'm experienced being shocked, like when electricity shocked you, when I touched the apples, I have to pull back my hand. I changed 8 pair of gloves one morning. In the help of the tractor that is moving in front of us, we have to put the gloves on there turn by turn just to get a little bit of heat. So they're not protecting the workers. They need to put more stuff in place where we can protect ourselves. And that only thing can do in that farm can help us do that is permanent residency. As I said, we don't have any rights from the minute you get off the plane and enter the airport, our rights is left there. We can't speak up. I remember there are days when I sick and they said, oh, just sit it off, wait it off. I waited off a couple hours. As I said, you can't talk much. I waited off a couple hours and I wasn't feeling better. And I said, no, I need to see the doctor. And they say, oh, they don't employ sick persons here. I'm like, what do you mean you don't employ sick persons here? I get sick here. So you're supposed to take the time out to make sure I am okay. I'm not a robot, so you're supposed to take the time out to attend to us. So when they're talking about climate change and how that will affect agriculture, the smoke affect a lot of agriculture workers because they were forced, if you're working outdoor, you were forced to find in different means and ways how to get those produce picked. Whether you have to get a towel, wet it or something, just to make some kind of safety for yourself, which to be, I said, those supposed to be the boss problems. They're supposed to fix those. That's not the workers. They're not doing stuff like that. So they need better infrastructure. They say they're coming with greenhouse, but at the same time, greenhouse is not working because who's going to be there providing food when the greenhouse is unsafe? The chemicals is not safe for no one to be inhaling, and greenhouse workers inhale that every day. There's no safety protection. You're working, the bosses are selling you the same equipment they're supposed to provide you for your safety. They're selling it to you. If you don't have that money to purchase it, you have to risk it. And if you don't do the job, they're sending you home. So as I said, we cannot speak up about stuff like that. We need to have permanent residence. That's why we are fighting for status for us, so we can get that when we can speak up about problems. Because I said, the big boss is only sitting down and waiting for the cash, not for the problems. You know, if you complain, they say you complain too much. You don't have to complain to your boss if we have PR. We can just go straight and complain to the government, say these farms are bad. They need to come and check them out. You can't be living with rats running around your food and you don't try to get the pest control to come and take care of stuff like that. You're expecting us to run it down rats like we are hunters. We cannot be doing stuff like that. That's not right for work. A worker is supposed to go to work and then you leave work and you go back home and you rest and speak with your family and get yourself ready to prepare for tomorrow. We cannot do that. The housing condition is very, very sad. In for instance, a room like this, not sure the size, This would hold at least 1,000 people. Not to say surprisingly to sleep here, cook, eat, bathe, everything in this one department. That's what it is, sustain. Yes, it is very, very sad to know the people that is feeding the economy is the people is not being taken care of. You know, as I said, justice for workers, because without the workers, there's nothing gonna be done. And the country is gonna collapse. Sorry to say that, but without these people that is willing to leave their country to come here and help us and your kids feed or take care of your family or stuff like that for you to go out and have a nice job. These people are not gonna come and do it because the system is not for us. So who is gonna do it? So I said they need to fix the system so the system can keep going and flow right for the next generation. I have 2 kids. I want my kids to go to college and stuff like that and learn things. I cannot pay for them to go to college with the pay that I'm getting without jobs. So how is those kids gonna come and be an engineer if there's no work or no easygoing mindset? But while you're doing those work, you can't provide for your kids. It's unfair. Yeah, so status for all, that's the key solution. As I said, everyone's supposed to have an open mind to speak whenever there is a problem. Everyone's lives matter. So I said, justice for migrants. We need permanent status for us to live a normal life, a regular Canadian, have those options. Yes, thank you.
That's fantastic. And I think you make such important points. For me as an organizer with the Workers Action Center, we see over and over again that when there isn't just cause protection or protection for political activity in the workplace, workers are very easily fired from their jobs. Imagine what it's like to be worried about being deported and not being able to sustain yourself. So I can really see what you're saying, that Status for All is a climate justice solution on its own. I'm also mindful of the fact that farm workers are excluded from Employment Standards Act protections, which is shocking to think that there are no real minimum wages. There's no real laws to enforce. So I think, again, raising the floor of wages and working conditions and Status for All is such an important part of climate justice. Now I'll pass it over to Rebecca Keach. I'm really happy to meet Rebecca in real life, and I'm so honored to be part of this panel with her. Rebecca Keach has been an auto worker at the GM assembly plant in Oshawa since 2006. She is a member of Unifor Local 222. She was on the Local 222 Education Committee for 9 years and has worked with the Local Political Action Committee in the past. When General Motors announced plans to close multiple plants in 2018, including Oshawa, she was part of a labor community coalition called Green Jobs Oshawa that called for government intervention through public ownership and converting the plant for socially beneficial production. And that, with no further ado, I'll pass it over to Rebecca. Thanks so much.
Hi. So I'm speaking with you tonight as a member of Green Jobs Oshawa and as a rank and file labor activist. I am not in any way speaking for Unifor or Local 222. So I'm speaking as a rank and file auto worker. So to the question of what does your sector and your work currently look like? The auto industry in Canada is really significant, and it is an industry at the forefront of disruption due to the transition. To give you an idea of its size and impact, I have some of the facts about the auto industry that Unifor reported on their Auto Talks website. Canada's auto industry directly employs 125,000 workers in 2022, including 37,000 in assembly, 17,000 in truck and trailer production, and more than 71,000 in parts. Factoring in additional auto-dependent jobs along the value chain, as well as other spin-off jobs, the auto industry supports a whopping estimated 462,000 jobs across Canada. In 2022, Canada's auto workers built more than 1.2 million vehicles. That's around 3,352 every day. They produced vehicles and parts worth more than 81 billion in 2022. The auto industry exported 63 billion worth of goods in 2022 8% of Canada's total. Among all of Canada's manufacturing export industries, the auto industry ranks number 1. In Ontario, auto industry exports represent 29% of all provincial exports, the largest and most significant of the trade-dependent sectors. I work at the Oshawa Assembly Plant, where we are building internal combustion engine trucks. GM claims that the profits that we make from these trucks are going to be used to fund the transition to electric vehicles. They are very profitable. The auto industry is completely dominated by capitalist corporations headquartered in places other than Canada, like the US and Japan. Priorities on profits has led to the current international structure of vehicle production and emphasis on individual consumers, downplaying urgency of eliminating fossil fuels and disregarding the impacts on communities and workers. What changes do I anticipate, or am I already experiencing because of the energy transition or climate change? As I mentioned, the auto industry is at the forefront of this. I think next to energy sector workers, people in transportation are going to be directly impacted, manufacturing. I feel a lot of frustration as the government and industry respond to the climate crisis and energy transition. They're continuing to focus on private corporate solutions, and that is to our detriment. As an example, so there's a lot of transition in it. Automakers are in the process of transitioning. In 2021, GM announced plans to become carbon neutral in its global products and operations by 2040. They wanted to eliminate tailpipe emissions from new US light-duty vehicles by 2035, and they committed to invest $35 billion in electric and autonomous vehicles through 2025. They have plans to reach more than 1 million units of annual EV capacity in each of North America and China by the end of 2025. That's a lot of focus on energy transition and electric vehicle production. So what this means to workers is that there's going to be extended periods of downtime as factories retool and a lot of anxiety. There's always anxiety in the auto industry. It is very unstable from a worker perspective. The threat of plant closures is real, and Canada's auto industry has seen a huge decline in its footprint over the last couple of decades. Some are saying now that we have we are expanding our footprint and becoming, gaining ground in the production of battery electric vehicles. But there is a problem with that, and that is our movement to a just transition cannot have us doing the same things that we've always done, including focus on private vehicle ownership. Something that, you know, when we talk about the just transition, so I heard from Trevor earlier and Jess, and there are things that go around that all workers are going to be impacted by. So when he talked about rising temperatures as a health and safety concern for workers, it's also something that's a health and safety concern for anybody in manufacturing plants, particularly, as I understand from my experience in auto. People get hot, they pass out on the line, they get heat stroke, heat exhaustion. This is a real thing. One of the things that were negotiated, I remember thinking it's incredible that you have to negotiate air conditioning for your workers as they make you billions of dollars in profit. But I mean, if it's hot in a plant, I imagine that picking strawberries or doing other work like that outside under the sun would be incredible as well. And that's something that we're all going to be facing. The same thing, the smoke from forest fires that she mentioned as a hazard. I was on Facebook and I saw notices from auto working friends in the States who were also experiencing difficulty with air quality in the plants as a result of the forest fires that we were having in Canada. So the climate crisis isn't going to know borders. It is going to cross borders, and it's going to impact all of us as workers. Another thing is with the disruption is that Unifor estimates that approximately 30% of workers in the independent auto parts sector are vulnerable to disruption. So job dislocation and job transition. That is a lot of people being impacted who aren't getting extra supports negotiated for them, lower wage workers, and they deserve to have dignity in their future too. So what are your hopes? What are your hopes for yourself, your colleagues, and your community in the future as the world transitions away from fossil fuels? I don't want to just survive the climate crisis. I want our community to thrive. A thriving community supports the development of everyone's full creative, intellectual, and physical potential. We don't just live to work. We must work collectively and reinvest in communities, fight privatization of public services, and end the harm caused by unequal distribution of resources. I want my community and my coworkers to fight for that. I want workers to recognize that we have to create the narrative and fight for the things that we value. We are worth so much more than what a corporation will pay for us. Our right to clean air, water, and green space is something that we need to fight for. Our right to a place to live and call home is something that we need to fight for. A life with dignity is a right worth fighting for. Collectively, we have a right to a safe, secure, sustainable future, but we have to fight for it. I want workers to reject the idea that everything we do has to be through the lens of what will make a corporation competitive. I want people in the community to support good public services and to be open to the idea of expanded public ownership. And what do I have to say to what do I want elected representatives to know as they build plans for transition? I want our elected representatives to acknowledge and recognize the enormity and scope of the environmental issues we are facing and what is at stake. I want them to recognize the urgency of the situation and then take action appropriate to a crisis. Because right now they are not acting like we are facing a crisis. I want them to recognize that just transition is the type of transition we are demanding. We are going to be transitioning to adapt to the climate crisis one way or another. As COVID showed, we are poorly prepared for any crisis. There is no doubt that the environmental challenges that we face are going to require us to change everything about how we work, play, and live. A just transition has to be more than just employment and sustainability. It means social justice, economic justice, and environmental justice, leaving no worker or community behind. I want them to think about the questions of what we are producing, who is producing it, and why we are producing those things. We cannot have a just transition or even a sustainable transition if we continue to depend on privately owned corporations that are profit-driven and look to them for climate solutions. I want them to think bigger. We need to oppose the right of corporations to move their investments out of existing communities, be prepared to directly intervene with public ownership, and reinvest in plants and workplaces that are threatened with closure. I want them to engage in democratic processes to develop environmentally friendly products that meet social need instead of corporate bottom lines. They need to answer the call for investment in public transit, reliable mass transit that can alleviate the need for private vehicle ownership. And that may seem a strange thing to come from an auto worker, but I want to have a future for my niece and nephew and for my family members and community, and we're not going to have that by doing the same things that we've always done. The affordability crisis is not going to be solved by giving corporations billions of dollars. And I say that because the auto industry right now is heavily subsidized. The battery electric plants that are coming in. So I think that we've announced subsidies of that are going to cost us around $45 billion. $45 billion of public money going to subsidize battery electric vehicle plants, which, I mean, there's a role for government and subsidies, but that can't be the only thing that we're doing. And we need subsidies in other things like mass transit. Most importantly, I want to see the justice in this transition and not just a sustainable transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. I totally appreciate what you're saying, is that the individual solutions or market-based solutions are not working for ordinary people. Like, why can't we dream about free public transit that is well-funded and services all the communities? That would be such such a more exciting solution than being able to buy our individual vehicles and filling the streets with more vehicles. So I really appreciate that. And also just your point about having to negotiate air conditioning. And I was reminded about cleaners coming into the center who were telling us that, the so-called environmental measures that, office buildings would take, which involve turning the air conditioning off at night or turning the heat off at night. But of course, when are those buildings being cleaned? That's basically, so those workers have to go in and clean those buildings with no air conditioning, no heat, and so forth. So these are really important considerations, and really about making visible all the invisible work that takes place, and to make sure that we leave no one behind. So I really, really appreciate that. I'm going to pass it over to Chris for some action pieces for the agenda today. So I'll just pass it back over to you.
Yeah, so I think you can hear me now. Amazing. We'll get back to our panelists very, very shortly here, but we just want to give folks in the room and folks online a chance to take action. So we're going to share a few ways that you can do that based on our sponsor or our co-sponsors for this evening. The first one is from the Council of Canadians. So again, the organization that I work for, we've been keeping a close eye on the Sustainable Jobs Act that's going through the federal government right now, going through the House of Commons. So that is going to very much pave the way for what sustainable work means, what it looks like, who it encompasses over the coming decades. So that piece of legislation needs to be a lot stronger in order to respond to the needs of workers, from the folks that we heard from tonight, from the folks that we're hearing from across the country in this series that you're participating in with us. And right now, that piece of legislation has been referred to committee. So there are 12 MPs who are looking at that piece of legislation and are going to make it stronger. And we would encourage you to take the opportunity. So we're going to have a QR code here up on the screen. Hopefully in a second here, and we'll also drop it in the chat. You can reach out to those MPs directly and send them a message to say, hey, I want a stronger Sustainable Jobs Act that supports all workers, especially those who are going to be really impacted by the energy transition. And we're hearing from those folks tonight. So again, you can send that letter to the committee members demanding that they make amendments to the Sustainable Jobs Act that ensures better worker representation and opportunity in planning for a just transition. We also want to share, I'm not sure entirely what's going on in our space here, which is okay. I promise you will have an opportunity to get to those, don't worry about it. We'll just make sure that the folks online have that opportunity. But I also want to share an opportunity from the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change. So Jess is a part of that organization. And if you visit statusforall.ca, you can send a message to your MP asking them to support Status for All, permanent status for all, and an uncapped regularization program without exclusion for workers like Jess and other folks, where that is the front line, the first line, in order to ensure, there we go, in order to ensure that their rights are protected. So if you're in the room now, you can take a picture of what we have on the screen here, or use your camera to scan the QR code and demand a permanent status for all. We've also got an opportunity from Blue Green Canada. So I'm going to call Christine Jones up here really quick. This is especially for folks who are at the OFL convention that we're hosting this at, but it is also an opportunity for you online if you want to share your voice. So I'll get out of the way.
First, a very brief video. Please don't want to watch me dance.
Ooh.
Temperature. They, it's really exciting. They can provide
These workers that are going to be able to create these new environments for us to live in.
It's important that as we move forward with a green economy, that workers are a part of the conversation.
If it's just left up to government and employers, they'll make investments and it'll make things more efficient, but it'll also produce jobs, good paying unionized jobs.
And so we need to come together and pressure our governments and corporations to follow us, to do the right thing.
What do you want? Speak up. Let your voice be heard.
So if you go to our website at bluegreencanada.ca, we have a whole section called Have Your Say. It's a bit of an old school speaker's corner, but we want every single worker in this country to have their say. And we have a series of questions on the website, similar to the questions that you heard this evening, which is, how has climate change already been affecting you? How do you think it's going to affect you? How do you think the government should be putting things into place in order to help every single worker in this country as we go through transition? We know 100% of workers and 100% of communities are going to be affected, right, by climate. It's not going to leave any one of us untouched. We need to speak out. And as one of our panelists said earlier, it's actually all of us that are going to be doing the work to make these changes, to make our communities livable, but also to bring about new possibilities. On Thursday here at the convention, we're going to have our videographer with us. And if you want to take a few minutes to visit our website, for those of you that are here at the convention, take a look at the questions and come visit us at our booth in the convention space where all of the different vendors are. We would love to have you videotaped like we did here and be part of our videos. And we want to have your say so that we can actually fight back to these politicians who say they want to hear from real workers. Well, you know what? I want to be able to be the person to open that space so that tens of thousands of workers across the country can literally inundate our politicians. And you need to have your say to help us do this. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to turn it right back over to Pam for one final way to take action with justice for workers.
Well, this is basically an invitation for all of you, and I think there's a QR code coming up, is an invitation for everyone to join our next online organizing meeting that's happening November 28th at 7:00 p.m. And in addition, I did want to make a little bit of a plug for our Climate Justice Decent Work resource, which is also available online. And it really talks about why we need to make sure that everybody rises when we're fighting for a just transition, and to make sure that workers don't experience climate policies as harm, so that workers don't experience climate policies as more expensive transportation or rent evictions where an affordable rental unit is suddenly retrofitted to meet environmental standards, and then suddenly it's vastly more expensive and so forth. Or to experience the greenwashing that we even see sometimes in hotels, where we're told, oh, don't wash your towels because that's going to save the climate, or don't have your rooms cleaned. But then it intensifies the pressure on workers who have to then go in and clean those rooms after, a number of days and so forth. So we want to get rid of the greenwashing, and we have real solutions that take into account all the workers that we have right now in our economy. So I encourage you all to download this, and there's copies available on the table at the back as well. So maybe pick one up before you leave. So with that, I wonder if either of the panelists have a question for each other, but maybe while you're thinking about that, I'll throw a question over to Jess to just maybe elaborate a little bit more about what it was like to be a farm worker during the wildfires, and how important status would be to help workers be able to organize in their workplaces for those kinds of health and safety provisions.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to answer this question on the behalf of my coworkers. because I am no longer a farm worker. I'm a farm worker, so I wasn't experienced it on the farm. But my farm workers share their story, and it lets a lot of them displace, get loss of touch with their friends, their families, lose their stuff in that process, you know, and without getting any paid. So while that is happening, they have to find their means of living without getting paid for those 2 or 3 weeks, a month of disturbance. They have to find it from their pockets to pay for everything. So it affects them dearly, because I said no one wished on stuff like that, but put more stuff in place to secure the workers when stuff like that happens, because I said it's not a man-made thing, you know. Fires just get out there in the wild. So find them a nice, decent place to live in while that is going on, you know, more than you just they have to find where to sleep, where to stay, stuff like that, because they're leaving from a next country. They don't have an idea where to go, where the next meal may come from, which that have to come out of their pockets, not the bosses, because the bosses is nowhere to be found.
That's exactly right. So thank you so much for that.
Yes.
And maybe, unless is there a question? Okay, I'll pass over to Chris. Trevor.
Hi again, everybody. I did want to ask Rebecca a quick question if I could. I just wanted to thank you for your great presentation, and Jess as well. You both did wonderfully. Good to meet you across the
Thanks.
internet world. Rebecca, you made me happy when you talked about the need for better mass transit and public transit, and I thought about how we used to have great train service running across Canada, and how some of our cities have good public transit and some of our cities don't have any. I just wondered what the situation was in Oshawa for public transit, whether you can take it to your job and to get your various errands done around town, and whether you also, I guess this is a second question, think there's potential for the manufacturing of trains and buses and other types of things that we need to build the type of public transit that you're suggesting we need. And I just want to say it was very refreshing to hear your really good ideas.
Pick that up. So to the first part of it about how is Oshawa Transit, I don't use the transit regularly. I am a user of a car. But I do follow a lot of groups that focus on transit, and what I hear from them is that it isn't enough. So I don't think that Oshawa has terrible transit or anything like that, but it isn't enough. It's crowded. It doesn't come conveniently, and people need more reliable transportation if we want to get people off of cars. As far as opportunities come for building, in Ontario and Canada, we can manufacture anything. We have a proud manufacturing history. We have manufactured buses and trains before in the province, and we could do it again if there was political will to have it done and the investments put in place to make it happen. And I think that that is critical. You know, there are other countries that invest in high-speed rail. We don't do that. There are, I mean, I'm not from Toronto, but from what I can see about the expansion to public transportation in Toronto with the subways and the debates about how to do it, it seems to be never ending and not particularly efficient. And that's something that we need to be taking on, because if we like, we have to change the way we look at everything. And that means we've got to get away from consuming everything and start trying to figure out how can we collectively build to have a better world. One of the things is public transportation. I don't want to be using cars. I don't want everybody, like, cars are expensive. You've got to pay insurance, gas, upkeep. It's never ending expense. We're talking about affordability. What would be something that would be great is affordable public transit, free public transit. So no matter what city we are in Canada, no matter how good it is, We need to have free public transit, and it needs to be reliable and awesome.
Are there other questions? I might do a little follow-up for that. And I know that there's some folks in the room from Northern Ontario communities that can tell us what an utter shambles the public transportation system actually is in, and how exciting it would be if we had politicians that could start to, imagine railway, as you were saying, railway and public transportation that connected all the communities, but not for profit, because we've seen what happens when we download it to corporations. It's like those servicing those smaller communities, if it's not deemed profitable, it simply doesn't happen. So I would love to hear from folks in the audience around that, about ways that we could imagine climate policy as being exciting policies unto themselves. Like, I love the idea of free transit that is actually, useful for people and actually addresses the different communities. What if we had public housing that put all the, the plumbers and the, and the carpenters to work, but it was actually not, nonprofit housing, a high quality public housing that people want to be in? How can we start to imagine climate solutions that everybody wants to be part of, not like a poison pill that, gotta pay your taxes, or we're gonna, and so many people wind up experiencing climate policies as harm instead of things that could actually benefit all of us. So how can we imagine those things? And I am still looking at folks in the audience. Oh, I see a hand.
So my name is David. I can speak loud. It's like karaoke all over again. Okay. Promise I won't sing. Okay, my name is Dave Edwards, local 30 sheet metal workers. I'm from the Durham area, and the problem with Durham is that it's so spread out, and because of it's so spread out, the transit is terrible. And presently, according to my records, there's only 9 electric buses in the Durham region that they're just implemented. So obviously we got to change, that, right? Working with Durham and working, subways, it's just not going to happen yet in Durham. We've had hard enough time, with Toronto area, right? Getting proper transit, subways underground. So Durham, we're years away. And then just another note, I was just looking at stuff. Trevor, is it Trevor? With his points on Denmark. Denmark is amazingly ahead of everybody in the world. And we actually have to start taking examples from certain countries that are leaders in all aspects. Like Denmark is one of the leaders in the yields of their crops, and we're 232 times bigger than Denmark. Imagine how much, if we implemented their programs into Canada, how much yield we could produce. We could feed the whole world. So we have to start thinking as a global community, because climate change is not just in Canada, right? If somebody's smoking in this room, we'll all smell it, right? So we have to start thinking a little bit more wider. Canada's doing a great job. I agree, we can do better, but China, USA, India, Japan, and Korea, I believe, are the top 5 carbon producers in the world. So we have to start putting pressure on our government to put pressure on other governments to stop climate change as well. So that's all I have to say. No singing, promise. Okay.
We'll do everyone can respond. So everyone's going to get a chance to respond. Thanks so much. Maybe I'll throw it over to Trevor, because I think you haven't had a chance to answer a question yet. So you start, and then I'll come to Rebecca, and then to Jess.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I caught the question, but I guess I would just say that that's really great. People are doing research as they sit here and listen, and Yeah, there are probably a lot of examples. I've heard New Zealand is doing good things as well. And I'm sure there are lots of other examples in I guess what's referred to as the global south that we could learn from as well. I believe it's in Bogota, Colombia. They've done some really good work to prioritize public transit on their streets. And even though they may not have the latest technology, they are moving, hundreds of thousands of people very efficiently just by saying that on this particular street, buses have the priority. And as such, many more people are able to get to and from work much more affordably, just simply by saying that road space should be prioritizing public transit vehicles. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
Somebody mentioned it, but the other part about it, so not only do we need to be able to move in our community, but with public transport comes, or should come, the opportunity to have good paying jobs and good stable employment. And that's why we need to make sure that the transportation remains public and isn't outsourced and privatized. And it is a real problem. I remember there was a one community close to here, I can't recall the name of it, but they made a pilot project with a Uber style transportation, and it worked out at first, but then it became increasingly expensive and unsustainable. So we cannot, I think it's really important that we fight hard, because the municipalities aren't getting enough money, the provinces aren't getting enough money that they're saying is earmarked for transportation. And it's something we need to fight. If you're interested in public transit, there are dozens of public transit grassroots movements from coast to coast. There's one that the ATU spearheads, I think, called Keep Transit Moving, and it's a coalition of units. And there's one in Ottawa, I can't think of what the name of it is, but the Labour Council would probably be able to connect you to it.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And Jess, do you want to add?
Yes.
You've got a closer mic.
I'm not sure if it's a question. I'm just sharing my idea. I'm just wondering, like, why is the renting cost so high? Just solution from off the bat for me. Why the government are these stakeholders of these buildings locked up, and they can charge a smaller amount and someone will occupy those space, and something will be coming in more than those same people have to be homeless or being on the street because they cannot afford the rent. Like, for instance, for me, I only make $1,000 a month, and I have to pay $800 from that to my rent, and the rest is in transit. So I have nothing to feed myself. So I wish to be, I'm still looking to find somewhere more cheaper, but there's no one renting it. They prefer to lock it up for those high demands that is never coming. And so many people is on the street homeless. So as I said, there's solutions there. They can fix these problems, So that is my solution of why building all those condos. Who's occupying them? But for 1 year, someone can occupy that space for 1 year and you charge them less than all that high demand, and they could live comfortable and not being on the streets. Yes.
Thanks so much. And I think that's a really great point that we can start to wrap up on here. I did want to just address both of your questions and tie all of these things in, because it is true. Like, you can see this vicious circle that when we fight for income supports for people, whether it's, injured workers or social assistance or even, employment insurance, you can see if we don't get the housing question under control, more resources from tax dollars is simply going to be handed over to private landlords. And so we need to be thinking through, how do we fight for these collective solutions, for these public solutions, these non-market solutions, because anytime there's wiggle room, it seems like they're going to find their way out of them. And I think the more that we understand that climate justice, is migrant justice, is justice for workers, is gender justice, is racial justice. I think if we can imagine a scenario where we all benefit from climate solutions, then everyone's going to see their part in a climate justice future, and everyone's going to have a role to play. But I totally agree. I feel like market solutions have not worked and are not likely to work because, otherwise it's just going to be profit-driven housing, profit-driven transportation, and it's just not going to work out for ordinary people. Thanks very much. Maybe a round of applause for our panelists before I pass it back over to Chris.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pam. And thank you to the workers who spoke with us tonight. As mentioned, this is just a part of a larger series. So next week, we'll be hearing from workers in the Atlantic, including fishermen, forestry workers, and somebody who actually does do sheet metal work. So that's a neat tie-in. Thanks, Dave. Before we close up for the evening, I just want to take a really quick opportunity to remind you of the opportunities to take action tonight. So the first one is you can send a letter to those committee members who are going to be amending the Sustainable Jobs Act to be stronger and to actually push for a lot of the changes that we've been talking about here tonight. So we'll share that in the chat, and we'll share that again with the folks in the room. We've also got that letter from Migrant Workers Alliance for Change and around the Status for All push. So again, you can visit statusforall.ca to demand permanent residency. And again, making sure that those workers are properly protected and represented in their workplaces. And also we have, again, that Have Your Say campaign from Blue Green Canada. So you can visit bluegreencanada.ca to get involved with that. If you are at the OFL convention and you want to share and have your say, as it were, you're able to do that on Wednesday. So we're going to take all of these stories, all of these perspectives from workers across the country. Again, we've got 2 more webinars coming up this year. We have some more coming up next year. And we're going to figure out how to use them to put pressure on decision makers, how to share the stories of workers so that we ensure that we have a future for everyone, not just for corporations. So with that, we'll take the opportunity to close this evening. So I just want to thank Justice for Workers, Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, Blue Green Canada, and my own organization, the Council of Canadians, for putting this event on this evening. So thank you to all of those folks. I also want to thank our panelists. So thank you so much, Jess. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Trevor. We really, really appreciate you sharing your perspectives, and we have a lot to think about as we leave this room. And just one final thank you. I want to shout out to Pam, who was a fantastic, fantastic moderator this evening. So thank you, Pam, so much for sharing your evening with us. And with that, we'll close. We'll see you next week if you want to hear from workers in the Atlantic and what they're saying, and then workers in the prairies the week after that. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you again. This has been Jobs, Justice, and Climate, an Ontario Workers webinar.